Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this session, we're going to check out some more features of the iZotope Ozone 8 plugin suite, but we've pretty much covered all the modules now, and now we're going to work on some extra features of the Ozone 8 suite that I haven't covered in any of the other topics. And I'm going to refer to this section here, or this video, as the advanced features. And there's three specific features that we're going to look at. And one is the codec section, one is the dither section, and the other is the referencing section. So the codec section is a quick summary, is a feature that allows you to preview what your master will sound like after you've applied some sort of lossy compression to a different audio file format. So, for example, when we're working in mastering, we're working with lossless audio. So we're, working with WAVs or something like that. So we're looking at the best quality that we can at the time. But generally what happens in the real world, that gets then compressed down to MP3s or some other compressed format to make the file smaller, easily transportable, and played on iPhones, whatever phone you've got, iPods, anything. But what that does is obviously there's an impact to the audio in that it compresses it, it removes certain audio bits that it believes that we can't hear or don't need to hear, and that sort of stuff. So there can be an impact to how you master your song to what it will sound like in that format. So Ozone 8 allows you to actually preview what your songs will sound like in those formats on the fly within the plugin itself. The dither section is something that not many people really understand. And to be honest with you, I don't know whether you really need to understand it in great detail. I find that the best way to know it is that if you are converting your audio files from a certain bit field, so 24-bit WAV, for instance, which is what I generally work in, down to a 16-bit WAV to go onto a CD or something like that, what happens is when it gets converted, you can get some noise and distortion that's not very good. And to get around that, what they do is you turn on a process called Dither, which actually applies noise, which sounds quite stupid, but it applies noise in a way that you can't hear it, but it gets rid of that issue of getting digital distortion from changing the bit depth. And the last feature is referencing, which is basically just track referencing. So they've got a section in there that allows you to import audio files and compare them to the song that you're mastering. Now, obviously, referencing is really recommended. I recommend it all the time. It's probably one of the biggest features and techniques that you can do because there can be so many flaws in your system, your room, your headphones, whatever you're working on. And to assume that what you're hearing is accurate is not always a good thing to do unless you're in a really expensive studio. So why not reference your songs to other songs that you know have been done in really expensive studios, have been mastered by the best mastering engineers in the world, and compare. Now, I don't expect you to get your songs to sound identical to references, and I wouldn't even suggest that you do because every song is different. You need to have a style, you need to have a sound that you like, but you also need to be consistent across the board. You don't want to be way out there with your bass or high-end levels, and it just does not match at all with any other music out there on the market. So it's a very good idea to reference because it does center you, it gets you realistic because you can get adjusted to your own sound, your ears of your room, and you don't realize how different it can be to every other piece of music on the radio or wherever. So that's another great section we're going to check out. So let's just jump over there and check them out. All right, so here we are in Cubase, and I have loaded the Ozone 8 plugin suite here, the full version. And the reason for the full version is because that's where the features we are going to look at are. So I have only just loaded the Maximizer module here just for the sake of having a module loaded. We'll see if we do anything with it to see the impacts, but the main thing is to run through these three sections. So you can see you've got codec, dither, and reference. So let's start off in the codec section here. So we can turn it on with this button here, and we can also click on it to open the section up. Now, one thing to note before you go anywhere here is that this section here for codec is obviously to preview your masters in these lossy formats. So it's at the end of the chain within Ozone 8. Now, if you are mastering with other plugins and anything else, then if you want to hear the true representation of the end result, you need to make sure that this Ozone 8 is at the end of your chain. Otherwise, you will not hear the impact of the other plugins. So obviously, if you have other plugins that you like to place after your set of chain here, but you still want to use this feature, then you're probably going to have to open another version of Ozone 8 just at the end, just to do this last little codec and dither, etc. So as you can see from the interface here, we've got two formats, MP3 and AAC. We can set the bitrate in either format, and we will obviously start listening to it if we turn it on, and we can even click on this solo button to hear the actual artifact. So the difference, what's being taken away or that sort of thing when the actual lossy format is applied. So it's not on at the moment. So if we just play the song, it sounds like that. Now, if we turn it on, obviously we get a bit of a stutter because this is going to introduce some latency because it is doing some processing on the fly. So the higher the bit depth, bit rate, the better quality. And the lower the worst. So you can hear they're soloing the artifacts there. This is what is being lost, I guess. You can hear it's a very top end weird sound. And you can hear it's quite different. And then you can hear there, if you go to 320K, very little is lost. There's still some loss. And even less on AAC. So one common thing with AAC and MP3 is the bitrate on them is not necessarily equivalent, or you don't think of it as equivalent. I always find that AAC is better quality at the same bit rate. So for instance, I might do an MP3 at 256, but then an AAC, I could probably get away with 192. So let's prove that point. We have a listen to what's lost. To me, it sounds pretty similar. So the concept here is, obviously this is the worst setting. And the point of it is that should we notice the difference or not? Now, obviously, if you're listening on very high spec speakers or headphones and things like that, then you may hear that difference, and people with very good ears will hear the difference. And I would never suggest that you run down to 96 kilobits per second. That I just wouldn't even go there. Okay, you know, and generally if I'm bouncing it out for clients, MP3s or AACs, I'm going to go to the very highest I can. Generally, I'll go 320 for MP3s. If I did AAC, I'd do 256, but generally I just leave it as MP3s. I always give them a lossless format as well, but just for example. So it's a bit hard to do a direct comparison between them because the delay in the changeover there is quite significant. What I do want to just test quickly is I'm going to solo it again, and I want to push the maximizer and see what impact that has. So let's take it down to something that's not great. I'm going to leave it in solo if I can. So there's probably a change, but is it that obvious? So most of the damage is being done just by the maximizer anyway. It's not really having a massive impact that I can hear in these headphones. As every other video, I'm wearing headphones that are not necessarily giving me the best results. But I can't hear any obvious difference to the codec there. So that's about the extent that we can do with the codec there. And as I said, there's a good example just to hear what happens to your song and what it sounds like as it's being compressed to a lossy format there. All right, let's move over to the dither. We'll turn the codec off and we're going to turn the dither on. So same controls, we've got an on-off button here, and obviously we can enter the dither here. So as I explained, generally what we're doing with dither is we are placing some noise deliberately onto the audio signal to do our bit depth conversion, and it is to prevent the distortion that can happen when you convert bit depth. So there's lots of fancy controls here, and I will be honest with you and say that if I ever use this, I would use it pretty much in standard settings. But we will run through it anyway. So for me, generally, I'm coming from a 24-bit depth file, and I'm going to convert to 16-bit. So this setting here is exactly what I want. So depending on what you're converting to, you're going to set it to the right one. Now, if I was going from 24-bit to 24-bit, I would not do that. So I would assume you would only do this if we're coming from something else like 32-bit float or something like that. But I'm not 100% sure if that is even required, but I will just trust that it is. So obviously if you want to go to 20 bits, you can. 16, as I said, 12 or 8. I don't know why you would go down to 8 either, because that would sound horrible. But 16 is usually where you're going to come in at. Okay, so the dither amount section here, it sets the amount of dither noise that's going to be applied, or the number of bits of dither. And the recommendation is to leave it at medium. You can go to strong if you want, but it does state in the manual that it will eliminate the non-linear distortion issues entirely that could occur on the lower settings. But it comes at the expense of a slightly increased noise floor. Low and off are obviously lower amounts of dither noise that's being applied, but it can leave some non-linear quantization distortion or dither noise modulation, something like that. So I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hear that, but you can see this line here represents the noise that's being applied. And you can see the level of that noise that's being applied there. They recommend leaving it on medium unless you've got some really specific reason not to. All right, so we've got a harmonic suppression button here, which is disabled on every setting except off. So off obviously means we are not applying any dither noise whatsoever. And what they state in the manual, and again, I'm going to be honest, this is way above my head at the moment. I do not understand the levels of this stuff. They state that if you can't have any dither noise and you need to turn it off, then the only other answer is to have truncation. And clicking the harmonic suppression button is supposed to alter the truncation rules, moving the harmonic quantization distortion away from overtones of audible frequencies. This option doesn't create any random dithering noise floor. Instead, it works more like truncation, but with better tonal quality in the resulting signal. And that just went straight over my head. So, happy for anybody that can explain this to explain it in the comments, because well beyond my knowledge of this process. Okay, so the limit peaks button here is meant to, as it says in the pop-up there, it suppresses spurious peaks of high frequency shape noise. So what they're stating is that dither is a random sort of noise that's applied, and it's very low amplitude, very low, you shouldn't hear it. But there are instances that, especially if you're using very aggressive dither, that there could be some spikes or things like that that occur, and this button here should limit those from occurring. The auto blanking button here, basically, as again it says, mutes dither when the input signal is silent for at least 0.7 seconds. So if you're working on some audio that has a lot of silence in it, you may not want dither applied because it may become something that you can hear in that silence. So the auto blanking there obviously will turn the dither off when there is complete silence. Now, for the majority of us, that's probably not even going to apply, because not very often do we work on music that has absolute silence. Even if there is breaks in music, there's usually something there, whether that's even just a trail reverb or a little bit of background noise, something. Very little do we ever have absolute silence. So it's there obviously for other purposes, but probably not something you're going to need in music. Okay, so the noise shaping basically sets the shape of this dither, and depending on the settings here, it can allow you to go harder with your dither, or you may need to go lower because of the place you put it. Now, again, I don't really understand dither to enough to worry about it. As a state, I generally leave these things on the default settings. Obviously, you can play with these with your content, depending on what it is. It may have different impact on different things. I haven't really noticed the impact enough significantly on music to worry about it. But you can turn it off. So we've got the shape is absolutely flat. Okay, so it's still there, but it's not shaped. Our lowest shape, and you can see the shape of the noise here. So you've got some noise at the low end here. We dip down here in the, 2 to whatever, 15K, and then we shoot up over 15K to 20. So this section here is obviously the section that is really key to what we're hearing in our ears. It's where the vocals sit. It's where all of the major content is. Obviously, we've got a lot of low-end instruments sitting down here, and up here, generally very hard to hear. Now, as you can see, as I flick through it, it determines the actual shape, and you can see how much of a big spike up there. But what that can also mean is that you might be able to go to lower settings as opposed to stronger settings, which you might go stronger in that section there, but go lower when you start to push like that. Okay, so we've got a DC offset meter here with a filter section here. So we can turn this on, and what that will do, it applies a high pass filter with a 1 Hertz cutoff frequency, which is supposed to resolve any DC offset issues. So DC offset, again, that's one of those things that I don't really truly understand too much, but the simple statement in the manual is that it's a defect in the recording process that can sometimes have the waveform not starting or sitting at 0 and can be slightly above, slightly higher voltage than 0. And applying this filter here can get that problem away and bring it back to 0 so the waveform is sitting in the right spot. Okay, and then we have a bit meter here, which is showing our bits that are being used and what we're setting to. So you can see the outside line there adjusts as I'm using it. And this can be used to determine, obviously, what we're converting to and if it's working and if there's any issues with a few things there. So I've never really understood this, but there's a few examples in there of what can be detected. One, they state headroom. So if you've got a 24-bit file, and let's say I had that 24 bits, it'll show you if you are using all of the 24 bits or not, which is determined whether you're using enough headroom or not, or there's an issue with your system. Now, if you're applying dither and you've got it set to 16-bit, you want to see 16 bits being used. But if you had a 24 and you're not applying dither, and you only see 16 bits, then that indicates that there's an issue somewhere with an AD converter that's only outputting 16 bits. So I can highlight some potential issues. Another one they refer to as a stuck bit. 1 bit in the middle of the signal isn't being exercised, possibly due to a faulty AD converter or bug with a software plugin. All right, so let's just have a bit of a play with this and see what we can get. All right, so first off, here's our song. I'm going to turn dither on, and I've got it set to 24-bit here, so doing no conversion or no application of dither really. Well, we are applying dither, but yeah, anyway. So you can see here we're using all 24 bits, so that's a good sign. Happy with that. Now if we switch to 16, we're now using 16, so it's all working well there. So our DC offset meter here will have adjusted if it was actually applying any DC offset or removing any, and in this case it's not, because you would see it sitting somewhere else. As you can imagine, auto blanking is really not going to do anything here. Now we can reduce our bits. So right now, I've gone for the absolute extreme setting here. I'm going to a bit depth of 8. I've got a dither amount of strong and a noise shape of maximum, which actually could be the opposite way around. We'll try that in a minute, because that bringing that up at the top end may be not heard. Okay, so in my headphones, I cannot hear that. All right, so I've got a frequency analyzer here, as you will see. And what I want to show is just an example of what this is doing. And you can see the waveform here, okay? So that's the waveform I'm applying. I've set it to strong. I've got it down at 8. Now if we play it, you can obviously see a huge spike there. And it will stay there for a minute in the shape of this dither for a split second there. So if we turn it off, now funnily enough, when we turn it off, you'll see this instant noise just stay there. Let me see if I can get both of these on the screen together. All right, so dither is off. Dither comes on. So we are applying this level of noise at minus 80 dB. Very, very low, even though I've got it set to strong. Now, if we change our bit, you can see it disappears. So it is so low now that it is below 120 dB. It's only till we get to 12 bits there that it comes up a little bit. And these two settings here, you're not going to use those. So changing these settings here again drops off. And then as we change our shape, you can see the noise being applied to the song. But again, as you change the bit depth, you can see there, we're only just getting that up there. So if you go back to the default settings, which is high, medium, 16, that's what we're seeing on the waveform there. So there's a little bit of noise coming up, trickling up there, but it's all below minus 110 dB. Okay, so there you go. That's Dither. As I said, I'm not an expert in Dither, so it's a pretty rough and ready example of it, but it gives you the basics of the controls and the layout of the iZotope Ozone version of it. So let us turn it off and get out of there. All right, so now we're going to move over to reference here. So we can obviously turn it on. We can select it. We can add some audio either way. Okay, so just loaded a file now, and we can add multiple files. All right, so it supports a few file formats. The manual states it supports WAV, AIF, MP3, AAC, or FLAC. All right, so as you load a song, so when we add it, we load it in. Obviously, we can click cross to get rid of a song too. You'll see these little markers pop up. So what they state in the manual is that it automatically creates some loops, and it determines that based on analyzing the audio and looking for similar segments detected in the track. So they're saying it uses the same machine learning technology used to generate the segmentation bar under waveforms in the Ozone Aid application. And it gives us some letters. So they're stating up to E, which it sort of has done here. Okay, so you can double click on a name to rename it. So if you actually want, if you know what it is, and you say, okay, that's the chorus, that's the verse, whatever it is, you know, bridge, blah, 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 you can obviously select that. So I'm guessing by this that it's determined that this section here, which is B, and this section here is B, should be the same, and this C, C, and C are the same, which would be interesting if they are. And if we come over to this one here, we really have an A, a C, and then giant B's. So it's either struggled to determine sections or the song literally is that. All right, so if we want to loop a particular section, then we just click into that section. As you can see, it's highlighting it. Or if we want to do the whole song, we can do select all by clicking this button here. All right, so I'm going to turn this off, and we've got this all selected. It's turned off, and pressing play, we're getting our audio here. You can see dual waveforms here. So as soon as I turn the on button here, which is basically our AB, we're switching between the tracks now. And you can see that I can loop it. I can adjust the gain, so if I'm finding one's louder than the other. And we can switch over to the other song. So you can hear it seems to have picked out those sections pretty well. Now the good thing is that you can see that I've gone over to the maximizer section here, and this waveform here is still appearing. And I can continue to switch between them while I do changes. Now, let's see what happens if we load another. Okay, so that's interesting. So it seems to apply across the board. So we got our EQ section here. So we could be looking at them and applying some EQ changes. So if we're seeing a big difference, we want to make a change. For some reason, do something really strange. Then we could go back to our reference section if we wanted to. We could load up some other sort of plugin. And again, our reference continues on in the view with pretty much any of the plugins. So I like that. I did not know that, and that is a very good feature there. So we can load up to 10 tracks. So I'm not exactly sure how this would work from a presets point of view and whether you could save them as presets. It's not clear in the manual. I can't find any actual mention of it, which is disappointing because that would be nice if there was some way to load these by default. But it could just be a case that you just load a preset and this is saved with it. So I guess the best way to test that would be to save a preset. So let's just add a test preset. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove both of those. So we'll take it off. And now if I go back and load, test, just change presets first to make sure it has actually loaded. And it doesn't seem to do that. So that's a feature that I would really like to see iZotope add, because this could have been a replacement for me instead of using an external referencing plugin. But the fact that you cannot save them means it's not really a great alternative. I like this, but it is missing that one component that I would love to see, being able to save presets of your 10 tracks so that you could pull them up like I would do in another external referencing plugin. I really like the fact that you see the waveforms displayed together throughout all of the plugin modules in this. So if you're working in this pretty much entirely, then that is a really good feature. But the fact that you can't save presets, look, it's not a deal breaker, but it's something that I would have really liked to have had. And obviously other referencing plugins have those features. So it's less likely that I'm going to use this feature when I can get a referencing plugin that's going to do a lot more for me. But other than that, it's a really good feature, and it's been good to have a play with it. All right, so there's the advanced features of Ozone 8. There's the codec section, the dither section, and the reference section. Let me know what you think of each one of them in the comments below. Do you use them? Will you use them going forward? What do you think about them? Do you think there could be any improvements or anything you don't like about them? If you're watching this video on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to get all the other videos and get notified as I release new ones. Check out all the other videos in the series for Ozone 8 or any other videos I've got on there, and feel free to come over to our website to check out the content I have over there. Hopefully this has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.